Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you haven't seen my face yet, it belongs to me, Sophie, Sophio, whatever you wanna call me. If you haven't noticed, my hair is like darker. It's almost black. It seems black. It's not black, but it's almost black. And today we're gonna talk about all of the books that made me cry, that made me sob like a little kid. And there are a lot because I cry a lot in books. That's usual for me. That we're gonna be starting with a book that I personally didn't like, but I'm gonna talk more about not liking that book on my 2021 reading wrap. Day of 2022, you're gonna have that video on my channel. But I didn't personally love this book, but it made me cry. So the thing is, I may not like books, but they still touch me and the topics in it still touch me. And that's the case with A Thousand Boy Kisses by Tilly Cole. I know everyone loves this book. I haven't heard a single bad thing about this book, and I feel like I'm the only person in the whole world that doesn't like it. But it made me sob so much, and I have a funny story with this one. So basically, I was getting my second shot of the COVID vaccine, and while I was waiting to see if I was gonna pass out with the vaccine, I was reading this book, and I was kind of crying with like all of the teenagers that were around me that don't read. So they were like on their phones and I'm like crying while reading a book. And yeah, I feel like this book, even if you don't like it, which was my case, you still feel a lot when you read it. And there's some topics in this book that I've dealt with, like sickness and stuff. I don't know, look up trigger warnings because it talks about sickness. You could be sensitive to it, but I cried while reading this book. This book is a story of Poppy and Rune, who are childhood best friends, lovers, because they've like loved each other since they're kids. And Rune has to go back to his native country with his family, and something happens to Poppy while he's out. And they stop talking, he comes back, and it's a mess. Basically, this is the book. I'm not gonna tell you much more because I feel like you should go into this book without my opinion in it. So yeah, if you want to read this book, I gave it like 3 out of 5 stars. It's not my favorite at all. I found it so cringy, to be honest. If you like young adult romance, and if you like to cry, go read this book. I would recommend this book if that's what you like. So next I'm gonna talk about All the Right Places by Jennifer Niven. Let me take this cover because I have the book that has a movie cover. I cried so much while reading this book, and I don't think I cried because of the story, because I already knew the story. I watched the movie before I read the book. I feel like the quotes in this book were the thing that made me cry the most. I feel like this book is so well written. The quotes in it are so heart-wrenching, and I feel like that's what made me cry the most. And the way that the main character Finch thinks about life, I feel like that's the thing that made me cry, not the story itself. So yeah, I totally recommend this book. Also look up trigger warnings. Most of the books I'm gonna talk in this video, you should look up Trigger Good Cry. If you wanna be thinking about a book 2 days, 1 week, 2 months after you finish it, this is the book. The next book I'm gonna be talking about is Addicted After All, from the Addicted/Calloway Sister series. So there are a total of 10 books in this series, and it's the Addicted series plus the Calloway Sister series. I've only read 7 books out of 10 of this series, but the book that made me cry the most of this series was Addicted After All, which is the last Addicted series book. And I feel like I cried because, again, it was the last one. We have been growing with these characters that are Lily and Lo since the first book, and I feel like it made me cry because it was the last one and we were kind of saying goodbye today because we still have like 3 more books to read. Still have 3 more to read, but I had to stop on this one because I had to stop and be like, let's let Addicted After All sink in. That this book made me cry and impacted me so much that I needed to stop to read the series, and it made me cry because I felt like I had the closure that I didn't want to get, because of course you never want to finish a series. The next book I'm gonna show you, it's probably a book that I've showed you in all of the book videos I have ever made, and It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. I feel like me and everyone in the book community recommends this book all of the time, so if you haven't read it yet, I don't know what you're doing, but this book made me cry so much. I'm not even gonna explain the story because I feel like when I don't explain the story, it's better for people to read it because they're going into it without knowing what it's about. But you know it's sad. You know this book is sad, and I've explained the story of this book previously on my channel, so I'm not gonna explain it. If you wanna cry a lot, read this book. The story is stunning. Quotes in it are stunning. It made me cry so much. It's so worth it. It's probably the saddest Colleen Hoover book I've ever read, and I have 3 Colleen Hoover books that I'm gonna talk about today, and they're probably my favorite one too. I hope you can get your hands in this if you haven't already, because it's so worth it. The crying is so worth it. What I'm gonna talk about is Just Don't Mention It by Selma Skame. It's from the Millie series, Did I Mention I Love You series, which is one of my favorite series until now, and I have read a few series by now. Did I Mention I Love You, Did I Mention I Need You, and Did I Mention I Miss You? And then there's Just Don't Mention It. Just Don't Mention It is the 4th book, and it's Tyler's point of view, so the male main character's point of view of the 1st book. But there's a chapter that is his point of view of the 1st book, and then the other chapter you go to his past. So basically I would recommend that you read the whole series by order, but this book, even though the first one made me cry, it had so much description of his past that it really made me cry. For this one, please, and I'm asking you please to look up trigger warnings. It made me and my best friend sob so much because we have so much description of Tyler's past that obviously you're gonna cry. Obviously you're gonna feel affected by it. And it's a great book. I recommend this series to everyone that wants to start reading, honestly. Next book I'm gonna talk about is A Wish for Us by Tilly Cole, which is the same author as A Thousand Boy Kisses. And when people read A Thousand Boy Kisses and A Wish for Us, they always prefer A Thousand Boy Kisses. I'm the person that prefers A Wish for Us and that actually like this book a lot. I gave it 4 stars. I really, really like this book. It's really heavy, and I'm gonna say it here, it's like really heavy. The story is like really, really sad. You should look up trigger warnings if you... This is a really beautiful story, actually. It's kind of morbid, to be honest. Very morbid, but it's beautiful. It's the story of Cromwell and Bonnie. I read this book in 2020, so I don't remember it a lot. Like, it's a good book, but it's not that book that you will remember until the day you die. It's not that memorable. If you want to read a thick book that makes you cry a lot, because I can assure you that it will make you cry. Like, there's no way you won't cry with this book. It's one of literally the saddest stories out of all of the books I'm gonna talk about in today's video. But basically it's a story about Cromwell and Bonnie, who are both musicians, and they go to the same college to study music. They have to work on a project together, and yeah, I think you can guess what's gonna happen after that, but it involves so many more aspects in it, and those aspects are really gonna make you cry. Look up trigger warnings, not just for sickness, but for mental health. Next book I'm gonna talk about is Heartbones by Colleen Hoover, another Colleen Hoover book in this video. Colleen Hoover has potential to make everyone cry. And the reason why Heartbones made me cry was the unexpected plot twist it had. Go into the book thinking it's one thing and it's a completely different story. It's a completely different. Believe me when I say I didn't expect it at all. Actually, the story of Bia and Samson, who seem so different, but they are so similar and you have no idea about it. And the plot twist was the thing that made me cry. It was so unexpected that it made me cry. I feel look up trigger warnings too. Really, I actually really like this book. It's one of the most underrated by Colin Hoover, and it's literally on my top 3, I think. Next book I'm gonna talk about is no stranger on my channel again, and it's Conversations with Friends, which is probably my favorite books. The reason why this book made me cry, besides the story, which this is the book you should really look up trigger warnings for. I'm gonna say that this book is the most well-written book I have ever read. I'm so attached to this book still. I read this book in July and I am so attached to it still. It's the I've told the story of this book so many times on my channel, so I'm not gonna say it again. I'm gonna put my first book video here because I talk about this book and I talk about other books that are in this video. This story is so well written. The way Sally Rooney writes just takes your heart out and doesn't put it again there. It just leaves a hole here. I still think about this book today. If you're not sensitive to the trigger warnings of this book, literally go read it. It's so good. I'm a romance reader and I usually really prefer to read romance, and this book is not romance. This book is fiction. It has romance in it, but it's fiction, and I loved it so much. It's one of my favorite books ever. Please, next book I'm gonna talk about. It's an interesting one that I feel like I never listen to people talking about it, and I feel like I know why, but it's Stepbrother Dearest by Penelope Ward. I read this book when I got my Kindle last year because and stuff, and I was like, okay, let's read some spicy scenes because I knew it would be spicy by Penelope Ward. And I was reading this book and I was like, this is kind of weird, this is going way too fast. And then you go to a point that it takes that you go 7 years forward, and when I tell you that one of my favorite book quotes ever, it's from this book, I literally mean it so much because I wasn't expecting this book to be so deep as it was, but it was, and I actually really enjoyed it. And good, and the story is actually so good that it made me cry because I wasn't expecting it. And I feel like books make me cry when I'm not expecting them to make me cry. And this rather is romance, so if you don't like that, don't read it. One of the most underrated books I've ever read. I feel like I'm gonna make a video called Criminally Underrated Books I've Read. Trust Again by Monokazen. This is part of a series, it's part of the Again series. I read 3 books of this series. This is the second one, and it's about Dawn and Spencer, one of my favorite book couples. And it made me cry because I feel like it's a second chance romance, not with each other, but especially for Dawn, it's a second chance romance because she was convinced that she wouldn't find anyone else, and then she finds Spencer. The way Spencer treats Dawn really made me feel something. It made me cry because of Dawn's story, because I feel like I relate to it in some sort of way. And you should look up trigger warnings for this one. There's an aspect of this book that could be triggering for some people. It talks a lot about mental health too, which I really loved, and I feel like that's the reason that made me cry. I really recommend this series. I really recommend this book. I feel like this book is my favorite one from the whole series. Unfortunately, I think that this book isn't available in English. I think it's available in German, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Dutch. And I'm so excited for the other books to be translated because I want to read them so much. I'm gonna talk about it in this video. It's a really expected one when you talk and when people talk about books that made them cry, and it's Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. Another Colleen Hoover book. This woman has the power, has the capacity to make everyone cry. I wasn't expecting this. And when you realize what the cover is, that's the moment when you start crying. I was talking about this book with my boyfriend, and he was like, why do you read it? Why do you read those stuff? Like, why do you read them? Because I know you're sensitive. I know you're gonna cry. Why do you read that? And I'm like, I don't know. I really like to read sad books. Like, those are my favorite type of books to read. And this book is one of the saddest books I have ever read. If you don't know the story of this book by now, I don't know what you're doing again. It's so well known. This book is so well known on the book community. It's a story of Tate and Miles and its brother's best friend. The quotes in this book are heart-wrenching. The story is heart-wrenching. It made me cry a lot when you realize what the cover is. So this was today's video. I feel like I haven't filmed the book video in 2 months. I needed to film a video. I wanted to film a video and I was like, I need to film a book video. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe because I will do more book videos, especially now. If you like book content, I feel like you should subscribe to my channel. And yeah, I hope you liked today's video. If you like any of these books, go to my Spotify. I feel like I have playlists for a few of them. I think Ugly Love, It Ends With Us, Addicted After All, Just Don't Mention It, and Trust Again. I feel like I have playlists for those books. So if you like to listen to music while reading, go to my Spotify. It's linked down below, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. I love you guys. Bye.